Reader, be stopped. You're in for some flops. Hello, it's Jayla. Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, welcome to your first video, and happy 2022, everyone. Before we get into today's video, I wanted to get gushy and just say an immense thank you to everyone who is here right now, watching my content, engaging with me on the daily. We are approaching my second anniversary on BookTube, and I couldn't be more thankful for the people that I've met and the people that I will continue to meet as I navigate this weird, beautiful corner of the internet. I definitely want to make some changes to my channel and my content in 2022, and so I'm hoping that you'll help me hold myself accountable and also inspire me, give me ideas, and just let me know what you want to see. But enough with the positivity, because that's not what we're here for. Let's get into the negatives. So, Reader, be stopped. You're in for some flops. I almost didn't make this video because honestly, while I didn't have the best reading year and not every book that I read was amazing and I hardly have any like great amazing books to recommend, I didn't really have anything that I despised either. But then I read a certain book that is definitely going to come in at #1 on this list, because while I would really call these rankings very like, they don't really mean that much, this one was definitely the book that made me remember that there can be really bad books in this world. But this is definitely going to be based off of finishability, I think, because the only book on this list that I DNF'd is #1. I also just want to say that I'm jeopardizing my career to make this video because I could get in professional trouble for this. So that's what I'm doing. I'm risking myself. I'm risking my career for you, for your entertainment. So leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because this is what I do. I ruin my ties in the publishing industry for your enjoyment, so be appreciative.
It is so bad, I want to give you a 0, but that's not possible. So I give you a 1.
The first book that I'm going to talk about is one that I just recently read. It was one of the last books I read in 2022. That book is Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I just read this like a few days ago and I listened to the audiobook, which was pretty good as far as like the acting and stuff, but the story itself was not that. This is a case of a horror book where just because you're self-aware doesn't mean you're good, and I think this book thought that because it pointed out the tropes and it pointed out like, you can't do that because the character that does this and goes in that direction usually dies. When we split up, we die. And just because you like point out how the standard horror story works, but then continue to do the things, it just defeats the purpose of your argument, I feel like. At first, I was really into the writing in this book as well. I thought like, oh, this is so nice, it's very lush, descriptive. But after a certain point, it started to hinder the story and it became more about description and less about what was actually happening. And that was really annoying. I would also argue that nothing really happens in this book. I feel like I was expecting, when I started reading it, I was really invested because I was like, oh, there's drama here. We've got like 5 friends, because the one eventually comes later. So 5 friends, they're all like together in this haunted house. There's a relationship drama happening, and there's past with like secret affairs and things like that going on. And I was like, oh, I didn't know there was going to be drama in here today. This is spicy. I don't know if you played that game Until Dawn, but it kind of reminded me of that, where all those friends are in like a cabin in the woods and they're hanging out and there's a lot of drama between them, and then stuff starts happening that determines kind of how their story is going to play out. So I was expecting that, but it wasn't that, which is not necessarily bad because it should be its own story, but this just didn't work. The direction it went in didn't work for me. I was super interested in the fact that this was kind of an unreliable narrator who had spent time hospitalized for like a mental thing that she was going through, which didn't end up coming into play really at all. And I just like overall was super disappointed. It flopped. It flopped. Unfortunately, this was a gift, and I really appreciate the person who gave it to me giving it to me, because I really wanted to read it, but I wish I had also read the Goodreads reviews. Did not know that this book had 2 stars on Goodreads. Should have looked into that first. Another one that I actually finished recently, even though I started reading it a long time ago, I think I had started reading it in October and finally finished it, is Tomi by Junji Ito. This book was good at first, as most Junji Ito stories start out for me, and by most I mean the only other one I've read, which is Gaio. But it suffers from the same issue. It suffers from one of the same issues I had with Gaio, which is that it's just so long. This is a very thick book, and I'm assuming that when it was initially released, it was released, you know, in parts. It's like comic issues. I'm sure that maybe you're not supposed to read this all in one go, and I didn't because I started it in October and didn't finish it until December. But as I read more and more, it just kept being the same stuff, nothing new, nothing changed, and you're just like, we get it. She's pretty, men like her, they die or they kill her. And it's just like, what else? What's going on? Why do we need to keep reading? What do I need to keep reading for? I will say there were some really interesting, I don't know what to call them, like variations to the story. There were certain stories in here that I really liked, or that added something new to the lore of Tomi, but then by the end it didn't even matter, and it was just really a letdown because I thought that we had kind of found a solution to the problem. I totally understand that to be intentional, and I think that in any other case it would have worked, but this story annoyed me so much that I was just like, I just want her to be dead. I just want her to die. I think I'm kind of done with Junji Ito for now, but I do want to read Uzumaki because that's the one, I think that's the most popular one. I think people love that story, and I want to see just like one more time. Maybe I can give this one a try and it'll work out for me, but as of right now, his stories just don't hit for me. Like, for instance, as I was saying, a lot of these end, like, this is not a spoiler, you know from the beginning that she dies in most of these stories. She gets cut up, she gets whatever, brutalized, and so most of these stories end with her dying, and then the ones that don't end with her dying, that don't end with gory graphic murder, they just end. And that's where I think I see like his storytelling is not really as strong as I expect it to be because people love him so much. It's as if she's not dying, he doesn't know how to end it, which was really uncomfortable to read. I was like, this is so awkward that we're just turning the page and we're just leaving it there. It didn't feel right. So while his art is incredible and his mind is super disturbed, like in a good way, I just think that for the most part, his storytelling really lacks in a lot of areas. Another book that I read that was truly not good, I just sat there after I read this book and I was like, what the fuck did I just read? And not in a fun, good way, like I usually like. It was just like, that was the dumbest thing I've ever read with my eyeballs. That was Night of the Mannequins. I read this completely on audio over the Halloween time spooky season area, and I was like hoping that I would really enjoy it because I enjoy the author and I think that he is very talented. He's got quite a mind on him and he's a really good writer. But then I read Night of the Mannequins and I just don't understand how you can write a whole story with the premise that it has. I'm gonna have to spoil this one, so if you don't want to know what it's about, if you still plan to read it, please skip to the next timestamp. But I basically, like, spoiler incoming, the entire story is that this guy thinks that a mannequin is gonna kill his friends, and so he kills his friends to spare them from the mannequin because he's like doing them a favor and giving them mercy. And I don't... Maybe I missed something super important because I read it only on audiobook, and to be fair, I was probably doing something else, like twisting my hair, and like I zoned out for a second or something. But for the most part, I think I got the main gist of the story. I don't think I missed anything too important. So, why? If you've read that story, please let me know what I missed, because I truly think the story was just dumb and it wasn't clever. It was definitely, you definitely go into the book thinking that it's going to be something else. So the twist, while in theory is kind of cool, the execution wasn't. And so now I'm wondering, like, was this supposed to be smart? Was this supposed to be like groundbreaking stuff that, I don't know. I don't even know how to talk about it because it's just, I just didn't like it. I get angrier the more I think about it, so I'm just gonna move on to the next book. And the next book was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Delilah Harris. I will say that this is not even the lowest rated, this is not one of the lowest rated books that I read in 2021. Like, there are books that are 2 stars that are not on this list when I gave this one 3. And that's because this book was one of my most highly anticipated releases of the year, and it just completely disappointed me. I honestly might even change my rating from a 3 to a 2, but as of when I made that review, as of when I had read it, I was really pleased with the representation of publishing as a very wide space and how it feels to be a Black woman in publishing, because that's something I very closely relate to. But as for the story itself, it was a hot mess and it just didn't really do what it needed to do. I really like a review from Mrs. WOC Reader, who has talked about this book extensively as well, and I will link her review down below. The science fiction element of the book kind of made no sense. The structure of the book made no sense. It was just really annoying. Like, they have these other POVs in it that are sprinkled in and you could totally do without them. You don't need them. They're a waste of space. And then the explanation for everything going on is just like shoved in at the end, and it wasn't compelling enough. It wasn't convincing enough. A lot of things about this didn't work, and that's why it's one of the worst books I read in 2021. And that's really unfortunate because I liked what it was trying to do, but unfortunately it just did not do it. Coming in at number 2 on this list would be 2 books, actually, because I could leave them on separately, but they kind of have the same issues, so we might as well put them in together. But that would be A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire and A Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout. These are books 2 and 3 in the Blood and Ash, not trilogy, even though it should be a trilogy. It should really just be a standalone because the second and third book were not good, as is why they've made it onto this list. But for some reason, this is going to be like 6 books, maybe more books, so whatever series it is. These 2 books, to put it simply, were not good. They were highly anticipated reads because I really, really liked From Blood and Ash, and then I read them, and I'd never felt so dumb for spending money in my entire life. I'd never felt so bamboozled by a book until I read these 2. You can really see how rushed out they were. Each book comes out like 6 months after the last, I believe. And you can tell that these are so poorly edited. There's no time between her writing them and them hitting the shelves. It just kind of comes out. You're in it for the sexy times, you're in it for the fun banter, but then she also tries to make it an actual fantasy story, and it doesn't work because it's completely info dump. Like, especially in A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, she info dumps for like 1 billion pages, and then none of the stuff she talks about appears in the book at all. Hinting at dragons and whatever, but then none of it actually appears in the story. And so you're sitting there and you're reading, and you're reading, and you're reading, and you're wondering, when will we leave this small little village we're in? When will we go do something that any of this correlates to? Because it never happens. I mean, eventually it does, obviously. But if you really want all of that info dumping to come into play, you gotta get to book 3. And then there's more info dumping, and there's more question asking, and there's more hinting at this thing, and there's more hinting at that thing, and then none of it really happens. And then a bunch of other irrelevant stuff happens, and you're sitting here like, no one cares about any of this. These books ruined everything that I liked about the series. I found Poppy to be this really fun, kick-ass main protagonist at first, who I'm later disappointed is just kind of a girl who's walking around asking questions and getting them answered. There's also lots of hinting at the joining, and at this point, I'm never going to finish these books, so I don't know what's going to happen in the future books, but just leave Kieran alone. Kieran does not want any part of this. Kieran does not like you. Stop touching him. Stop grouping him into things. Stop asking him questions. Just leave him alone. And that's kind of all I want from this series. If I were to read on, it would solely be to make sure that Kieran is okay. And he's not having to put up with all the bullshit that he's been putting up with in the last 2 books. And finally, the last book, coming in at number 1 on this list of worst books of 2021, is Kingdom of the Cursed by Carrie Maniscalco. I couldn't finish it. So that tells you all the things you need to know about that. I read Kingdom of the Wicked in November 2020. I found it to be hard to get through, not very good, but finishable. For something that was full of demon princes and sin, it was pretty freaking bland. Then we get to book 2, and you can tell that this book was definitely aged up to appeal to an older audience, which honestly was a good choice to make because I found the sexual chemistry between Amelia and Wrath in book 1 to be non-existent, whereas in this book they can't keep their hands off each other. It's actually really, really jarring to see her go from like them barely kissing in the first book to her dreaming about him pinning her to a table during a dinner party. I believe my thoughts on this book were simply that nothing happens, same as the first book. The things that do come in from the first book are irrelevant, and Amelia's still unlikable, and the writing is still bad. That was my biggest thing about the first book, actually, was that the writing was really, really atrocious. And then we get to the second book, and I know this book had a new editor, and so I was thinking, oh, it's going to be so much better, but it was still bad. It was still not good. It's still really hard to get through. I started skimming at some point before I stopped, and that's when you really know that you should just give up on a book, but I'm so hesitant to DNF anything because I just know that there's a possibility that it could get better. This was not one of those stories because I buddy read this with my friend Christine, and thankfully she filled me in on all the details. And I'm glad I didn't finish it because to find out what I found out about the ending would have been a waste of my entire life. Would have been a waste of so much of the effort I put into reading it if I had continued that book. So I know that a lot of people agree with me on this because I've been talking to some other readers who even liked the first book, which I truly did not, and some people gave this book 5 stars, and it still has so many stars on Goodreads, I don't get it. But anyway, some people who really like the first book absolutely do not like the second book, and so I'm starting to finally think, oh yes, the people they're realizing, they're seeing. Those are the 5 worst books I read in 2021. Thank you for watching this video. If you've read these books and agree with me, leave a comment down below. If you've read these books and disagree with me, leave a comment down below because I want to know what you saw in these books that I didn't see. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like please, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content from me. I'm hoping to be more consistent in the new year and definitely trying out new things, so stay tuned if you want to figure out what those things are, because I gotta figure them out too. That's all for this video. I'm done talking. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye!